She had been blind since birth, but music had always been her world. From the soft hum of the morning breeze to the clatter of dishes in the kitchen, she felt sounds in ways others might never notice. Her hands, delicate yet strong, had memorized the shape of the piano keys long before she ever imagined herself performing on stage. Every note was a friend, every chord a conversation. She lived in a small house with her family, who encouraged her love for music, even when life was not easy. Her mornings began with the familiar scent of fresh bread and the distant noise of neighbors starting their day. She would sit by her window, letting the world's sounds guide her thoughts, and then make her way to the piano in the corner of the living room. It was an old piano, worn at the edges, but it had a warmth that felt like home. Her fingers would glide over the keys, producing melodies that seemed to echo the feelings she couldn't express with words. She had no audience at first, just her reflection in the dark surface of the piano, and the reassurance that music understood her. From a young age, she had dreamed of performing for the world. The idea of sitting on a grand stage, letting her music speak when words could not, had always carried her through difficult moments. She practiced every day, often losing herself in the music for hours. Sometimes her family would worry she would tire herself, but they knew she was different. The piano was not just an instrument to her. It was a lifeline, a bridge to the world she could not see but felt deeply. Her parents had always supported her, finding teachers who believed in her potential. They traveled across town, seeking someone who would nurture her talent rather than pity her. One teacher, a kind elderly woman, had recognized the fire in her spirit immediately. She taught her not just the techniques, but how to feel each note, how to let her heart guide her fingers. The lessons were long and sometimes frustrating, but she never gave up. Every mistake was a lesson, every failure a step toward something greater. As she grew older, the piano became a part of her identity. People in her town began to notice her gift. Sometimes, neighbors would gather outside her window to hear the music that floated into the street, soft and haunting. She never performed for praise. She played because the music was part of her soul. But the whispers of admiration and surprise reached her ears, and slowly, the thought that she could reach a larger audience began to grow. One day, her teacher spoke of an audition for a prestigious music school in the city. It was the kind of opportunity that could change her life. The thought both excited and frightened her. She had always played for herself, and the idea of performing in front of strangers, especially someone world famous, made her heart race. But her teacher's words were encouraging. "You have something special," she said. "The world needs to hear it." The audition was scheduled for a month away. She spent every day preparing, her mind focused on each key, each note. She would play until her fingers ached, sometimes stopping only to rest and listen to the sound of the wind outside. She imagined the grand hall, the audience waiting in silence, the piano shining under the lights. Every detail, though unseen, lived vividly in her mind. She also prepared herself for doubt. People often underestimated her because of her blindness. She had learned early that the world could be cruel in small ways. Whispers, stares, dismissive comments, but she had learned to ignore them. Her music was her armor and her voice. She told herself that she would not let anyone's disbelief shake her confidence. If she could feel the music in her bones, nothing else mattered. The day before the audition, she sat by the piano longer than usual. She closed her eyes and let her hands wander over the keys, feeling the familiar grooves and edges. She played pieces that challenged her, music that demanded every ounce of concentration and emotion. The notes became a conversation, a rehearsal of courage. She imagined the pianist who would judge her, wondering what he might think. She hoped to surprise him, to show that talent has nothing to do with sight. That night, she lay in bed listening to the city outside. She could hear distant traffic, the laughter of children playing, and the occasional bark of a dog. She thought about the journey ahead, feeling a mixture of fear and anticipation. Her family checked on her, offering quiet words of encouragement. They knew this moment meant more than any performance. They knew it was a test of her resilience and determination. When she arrived at the audition, The hall was large and intimidating. She could hear the echoes of her footsteps on the polished floor and the murmur of the audience settling in. Her heart pounded, but she reminded herself of the month of preparation and practice. She guided herself to the piano, letting her hands find their familiar place. The lights were bright, but she could not see them. She did not need to. Her world was sound, touch, and feeling. As she began to play, the room transformed. Every key she touched spoke her story of struggle, hope, and passion. The audience fell silent, caught by the emotion in the music. She could sense their attention, feel the energy in the room, but she remained in her own world, letting her fingers tell the tale she had carried inside for years. This was the moment she had dreamed of, the moment where her music could speak louder than any words. Even before she finished, she knew this performance was different. She had poured every ounce of herself into the music, leaving nothing behind. The notes lingered in the air like a soft whisper, a testament to her journey. The world outside her music faded, and for the first time, she felt completely understood by something greater than herself. When she finally lifted her hands from the keys, there was a pause, a moment where the hall seemed to hold its breath. She could hear soft whispers, a few claps, but mostly, there was a quiet respect that filled the space. She had faced the unknown, embraced her fear, and allowed her talent to shine. And in that silence, she felt the first taste of what it meant to truly be heard. The path ahead was still uncertain, and she did not know the reactions of the world-famous pianist she was about to meet. But for now, she knew she had done all she could. She left the hall that day with a heart full of hope and determination. She had faced one of her greatest fears and found her voice in a place that once seemed impossible. The journey was just beginning, and she could already feel that her music had the power to touch lives, including those who doubted her the most. Every step, every note, every silent moment of practice had led her here, to a moment where she was ready to change the world, one key at a time. The next day, she arrived at the grand hall where the auditions were to take place. The building was enormous, filled with echoes of footsteps and distant chatter. The air smelled faintly of polished wood and piano polish, a smell she had come to associate with hope and opportunity. Her heart pounded, and she could feel her palms sweating slightly as she approached the door to the practice room. She paused for a moment, letting herself breathe, reminding herself that she had prepared for this day for months. Inside, the room was filled with pianos, each standing like a silent sentinel, waiting for someone to awaken it with sound. The other participants had already begun, and she could hear snippets of music drifting through the air. Some played confidently, their notes clear and sharp, while others struggled, their nerves visible even through sound alone. She took a deep breath, letting the familiar rhythm of her heartbeat settle her. Then, she saw him, the world-famous pianist who would judge the audition. His presence was imposing, almost intimidating. She had heard of him for years. He was known not just for his talent, but also for his sharp tongue and high expectations. Some called him a genius, others a tyrant. He was already sitting at a grand piano, listening with a critical ear as another participant played. She felt a knot in her stomach but reminded herself that her music was stronger than fear. When her turn was called, she walked carefully to the piano, her fingers brushing the keys as if greeting old friends. She positioned herself, sitting tall, and allowed her hands to find their place on the keys. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her, but she let it guide her, not scare her. Her fingers trembled slightly at first, but as soon as she began to play, the notes flowed effortlessly, as if they had been waiting for this moment. At first, the pianist's expression remained neutral, his eyes scanning her hands, his brow furrowed. Then he leaned forward, listening more intently. She could feel his scrutiny, the sharpness of his gaze, even if she could not see it. She poured her heart into the music, every note carrying her story, every chord revealing her journey. She wanted him to hear not just her skill, but her determination and her soul. But then, a comment cut through the music, spoken loud enough for her to hear. "How can a blind girl even think she can play like this? This is ridiculous," he said, his tone dripping with disdain. The words felt like cold water thrown over her, chilling her from head to toe. She stopped for a heartbeat, unsure if she should continue. A few murmurs spread through the room, and she could feel eyes turning toward her, some with curiosity, others with skepticism. Her heart ached, not just from the insult, but from the weight of the disbelief around her. She had known this moment might come, but she had hoped her preparation would shield her from ridicule. For a moment, she doubted herself. Could she really do this? Could her music truly speak loud enough to silence the doubt? She closed her eyes and took a deep breath, remembering the hours of practice, the moments of struggle and triumph, and the love that had carried her this far. She decided to continue, letting the insult fuel her rather than break her. Her fingers returned to the keys, and this time, she played with even more emotion, more depth. She poured her pain and determination into every note, letting it tell a story that words could not capture. The room seemed to fall silent, except for the sound of her music, which grew richer and more powerful with each passing moment. The other participants stopped their practice, drawn by the intensity of her performance. She could feel the shift in the atmosphere. The room that had been filled with doubt now felt charged with anticipation. Even the pianist seemed momentarily taken aback, his fingers resting on the keys as he listened. He had expected a display of skill, perhaps, but not the raw emotion and mastery that emanated from her playing. She played on, moving through the piece with precision and grace. Every note was intentional, every pause deliberate. She felt as if the music had taken over her body, guiding her hands, her mind, and her spirit. It was no longer just a performance. It was a declaration, a statement that she belonged in this world just as much as anyone else. She could feel her heart pounding, not from fear, but from the exhilaration of being heard. When she finished, there was a moment of silence so complete it felt almost sacred. She lifted her hands from the keys, her breath coming in slow, measured gasps. The room remained still, as if holding its breath, waiting for the world-famous pianist to respond. She could feel his eyes on her, sharp and evaluating, but there was also something else there. A flicker of surprise, maybe even respect. He leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. Then slowly he clapped. The sound was deliberate, measured, but it carried weight. The other participants began to murmur and clap as well, some in admiration, others in astonishment. She could feel a warmth spreading through her chest, a mixture of relief, pride, and validation. She had faced the insult, the doubt, and the scrutiny, and she had emerged stronger. After the audition, the pianist spoke to her quietly. His words were not kind, but they were different from before. He admitted that he had underestimated her, and while his tone remained critical, there was an acknowledgement of her talent that could not be ignored. She listened carefully, taking his words as lessons rather than attacks. She had faced the harshest judgment and survived, and now she understood that criticism, even when painful, could be a guide to growth. As she left the hall, she felt a mixture of emotions. The insult still stung, but it no longer held power over her. She had proven, first to herself and then to the world, that her blindness did not define her abilities. The music she carried within her was stronger than any doubt or disparagement. She walked with her head held high, her steps confident, knowing that this was only the beginning of her journey. Her family greeted her outside the hall, their faces filled with pride and relief. They had witnessed her struggle and her triumph, and their embrace felt like the final note of a symphony that had begun long before. She smiled, feeling the weight of the day lift slightly, replaced by a quiet determination to continue, to grow, and to let her music reach even further. That night, she sat by her piano again, replaying the day in her mind. She thought of the pianist's words, both the insult and the acknowledgement. She thought of her hands, moving across the keys with newfound confidence. She realized that the world might continue to doubt her, to judge her, and to underestimate her, but it did not matter. She had learned to listen to herself, to trust in her abilities, and to let her music speak louder than any criticism. She practiced long into the night, each note a testament to her resilience and her dreams. She knew there would be more challenges ahead, more people who might doubt her, but she also knew that she had faced one of the toughest tests already. The insult, once so sharp and cutting, had become a spark that ignited a deeper fire within her. She would carry that fire with her, letting it guide her fingers, her heart, and her spirit as she moved forward on her journey to become a true musician, not defined by sight, but by the power of her music and the courage in her soul. After the audition, she returned home with a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. The pianist's insult still lingered in her mind, but it had transformed into a challenge she was determined to meet. She knew she had to prove herself, not just to him but to herself. Every day, she devoted herself to the piano with renewed intensity, determined to grow beyond any doubt that had ever touched her. She began to practice earlier in the mornings, waking before dawn to enjoy the quiet hours. The house was silent except for the gentle sounds of her piano, the notes floating through the air and filling every corner of her small home. She had a notebook where she wrote down pieces she wanted to learn and techniques she wanted to master. Each day she set goals for herself, small at first, then larger, pushing herself beyond what she thought was possible. Sometimes the work felt exhausting. Her fingers ached, her back tired, and her mind weary. There were moments when she questioned whether she could reach the level she dreamed of. Doubts crept in quietly, whispering that perhaps the world was right to underestimate her. But she refused to listen. She remembered her teacher's words about perseverance, the long hours spent learning to let her emotions guide her hands, and the feeling of joy when she mastered a difficult piece. Those memories fueled her determination. Her family noticed the change in her, the fire that burned brighter after the insult. They offered encouragement, bringing her tea or quietly sitting nearby as she practiced. Sometimes they would hum along, adding a rhythm to her music that felt like a gentle cheer. Their support was a comfort, but she knew the work had to come from her own heart. The music had to flow from her alone, untainted by fear or hesitation. She also sought guidance from her teacher, who encouraged her to explore more challenging compositions. The pieces were difficult, demanding precise control, timing, and emotion. At first, she struggled, hitting wrong notes or misjudging the rhythm. But instead of giving up, she repeated the pieces over and over, each mistake a step closer to perfection. She listened carefully, feeling each note with her fingers, letting the music become a dialogue between her and the piano. As the weeks passed, she noticed subtle changes in herself. Her hands moved more confidently across the keys, her timing became impeccable, and her expressions became richer. The music that once felt like simple notes now carried depth and meaning. She could convey sadness, joy, tension, or peace with the same piece, depending on how she allowed her heart to guide her fingers. Every day of practice brought new discoveries about her own abilities and the power of music. She also learned to focus on the intangible aspects of performance. It wasn't just about playing the correct notes. It was about connecting with the music and with those who would listen. She imagined the audience, even if she could not see them, and considered how each note might touch their hearts. She practiced with intention, imagining herself on the grand stage, letting the piano become an extension of her emotions and thoughts. This mental rehearsal strengthened her confidence and prepared her for the challenges ahead. There were days when the process felt lonely. She sometimes wished for someone to play alongside her, someone to share the highs and lows of practice. But she discovered that the solitude allowed her to listen more closely to the music and to herself. She learned to trust her instincts, to make decisions based on feeling rather than expectation. This independence became a source of strength, shaping her into a more complete musician. Her journey was not without setbacks. Occasionally, she became frustrated, hitting wrong notes repeatedly or failing to convey the emotion she intended. She would pause, take a deep breath, and remind herself that mistakes were part of the journey. She learned to treat each failure as a lesson, dissecting it carefully, and using it to improve her skills. The insult from the pianist became less a wound and more a spark, a reminder that she could overcome any obstacle if she remained committed. As her skills improved, she also began to explore her own style. She experimented with tempo, dynamics, and expression, adding subtle nuances that made her music uniquely hers. She was not just replicating what she had learned. She was creating, shaping the music in a way that reflected her own experiences and emotions. The piano became a partner, responding to her intentions and allowing her creativity to flourish. Her teacher continued to challenge her, introducing complex pieces that tested both her technical ability and her emotional depth. Each piece was a puzzle, a combination of skill, interpretation, and passion. At first, some pieces felt impossible, but she persisted, breaking them down into smaller sections, practicing each until it became second nature. The process was meticulous, demanding patience and focus, but it also brought immense satisfaction. Every successful execution was a victory, reinforcing her belief in herself. During this time, she also reflected on her own growth and resilience. She remembered the moment of the insult, the sting of doubt, and how she had chosen to continue. She realized that the experience had taught her more than technical skill. It had taught her courage, determination, and the importance of self-belief. She felt a quiet pride, knowing that she was not defined by what others thought of her, but by her own dedication and passion. As the days turned into weeks and weeks into months, her practice sessions became more than preparation. They became a ritual, a way to connect with herself and the world through music. She felt stronger, more confident, and more capable than ever before. Each session brought new insights, new levels of mastery, and a growing sense of readiness for the next step in her journey. The world might have doubted her, but she had found a deep, unwavering belief in her own abilities. One evening, after hours of practice, she sat quietly, her hands resting on the piano keys. The room was still, filled only with the soft echoes of the last notes she had played. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath, feeling a sense of calm and anticipation. She knew that the moment would come when she would face the pianist again, when she would have the chance to show him and the world the strength and beauty of her talent. But she also knew that she no longer needed validation. Her music was proof of her journey, her growth, and her resilience. In those quiet moments, she felt a connection to something greater than herself. The piano, the music, and her determination had become inseparable parts of her life. She realized that the insult, which had once seemed like a barrier, had become a catalyst, pushing her to reach heights she might never have imagined. She was ready to face the challenges ahead, armed with skill, passion, and the knowledge that her music could speak where words could not. She continued her practice late into the night, each note a reminder of her journey, each chord a step toward her dream. She understood that the path would not always be easy, that doubts and obstacles would continue to appear. But she also knew that her resilience and love for music would carry her forward. The world might continue to underestimate her, but she was prepared, ready to let her music tell the story of her heart, her courage, and her unyielding spirit. The day of the performance arrived with a quiet intensity. She awoke early, feeling a mixture of excitement and nerves that made her stomach flutter. The morning was calm, the sun just beginning to rise, casting gentle warmth into her room. She sat by the window for a few minutes, listening to the soft hum of the world waking up. Then she made her way to the piano, letting her fingers glide over the keys in familiar, comforting patterns. This was her moment to shine, and she felt ready. The hall where she would perform was larger than any place she had ever played. Its high ceilings and polished wood reflected every sound, making even a single note seem to carry for miles. She could hear the soft rustling of people taking their seats, murmurs of anticipation, and the quiet movements of the stage crew. She felt the vibrations through the floor as the stage was prepared. The environment was different from the quiet of her practice room, but it was electric, full of energy that she could sense through the air and the vibrations beneath her feet. Backstage, she took a moment to close her eyes and breathe deeply. She could feel the piano awaiting her, a familiar companion in an unfamiliar setting. Her fingers hovered above the keys, remembering every practice session, every mistake she had corrected, every chord she had perfected. She let herself feel the music in her heart first, then allowed it to flow naturally through her hands. The nervousness was still there, but it was tempered by a sense of purpose and control. When the announcer called her name, she walked confidently onto the stage. The lights were bright, but she did not need to see. She could feel the audience, their attention focused, waiting. She positioned herself at the piano and took a deep breath, letting her hands find their place. For a moment, there was complete silence. Then she began to play. The music flowed effortlessly from her fingers, each note resonating with emotion. She had prepared for this moment not just technically but emotionally, and it showed. The audience was captivated from the very first chord. Her fingers moved with precision, yet the music was alive, filled with feeling and subtle nuances that made every phrase unique. She could sense the tension and release, the rise and fall of emotion, and she let it guide her performance. The world-famous pianist was in the audience, his expression unreadable at first. He had expected talent, perhaps, but not this depth of feeling. As she continued to play, she could feel the attention shift in the room. Every listener, no matter where they sat, was drawn into her music. The notes told a story of struggle, perseverance, and triumph, a story that transcended words and sight. She played not just to impress, but to communicate, to share her journey in the purest form possible. As the piece reached its crescendo, the hall seemed to hold its breath. She felt the energy of the room, the anticipation, and the awe that her music had inspired. Every chord was intentional, every pause deliberate. She was in perfect harmony with the piano, and it responded to her with warmth and resonance. The music was no longer just a performance. It was a dialogue, a living expression of everything she had experienced and overcome. When the final note lingered and faded into silence, there was a moment where the audience did not move. The hall was completely still, as if it could not yet comprehend the beauty and power of what they had just witnessed. Then, slowly, the applause began, growing louder and more enthusiastic, until the room was filled with clapping, cheering, and whistles. She felt a rush of emotion, her heart swelling with pride and relief. She had done it. She had captured the hearts and minds of everyone present. The pianist rose from his seat, and the applause grew even stronger. He approached her as she stood, trembling slightly from the intensity of the performance. His expression had softened, a mixture of admiration and humility replacing the earlier skepticism. He extended his hand, and in a rare moment of genuine acknowledgement, he said that he had never expected such depth and talent from someone he had doubted. His words, though simple, carried immense weight. They were a validation not just of her skill, but of her perseverance, courage, and spirit. She thanked him quietly, feeling a sense of accomplishment that went beyond recognition. She had faced doubt, insult, and fear, and had emerged not just victorious, but transformed. The audience continued to cheer, some standing, some wiping away tears, moved by the emotion she had conveyed. In that moment, she realized that her music had connected with people in a way that went beyond words, beyond sight, beyond expectation. After the performance, she returned to the piano alone for a few minutes. She let her fingers wander across the keys, playing softly for herself, savoring the connection she felt with the instrument and the music. The hall was now quiet, the echoes of applause fading, but the experience remained vivid within her. She had touched something profound, both in herself and in the hearts of others. Backstage, her family and a few close friends rushed to congratulate her. Their faces shone with pride, their voices filled with joy. They embraced her, and she felt the warmth of their support more deeply than ever. She had shared her journey, her struggles, and her triumphs, and now the world had witnessed her courage and talent. The moments of doubt and fear that had haunted her were now replaced with confidence and fulfillment. That evening, as she walked home, she reflected on the day's events. The insult from the world-famous pianist seemed like a distant memory, overshadowed by the power of her own determination and skill. She understood that the journey had been as important as the performance itself. Every hour of practice, every moment of doubt, every struggle had led to this point. She had learned that true strength comes not from avoiding challenges, but from facing them head-on and letting passion guide the way. At home, she sat at her piano once more, this time in the quiet of her room. She played softly, each note a celebration of her growth, her courage, and her love for music. She realized that while recognition from others was meaningful, the true reward was the mastery of herself and her art. The music had become a part of her identity, a testament to the resilience of her spirit and the power of persistence. As the night deepened, she closed her eyes and allowed the last notes to fade. She felt a profound sense of peace, knowing that she had not only met the challenge before her, but had transformed it into a triumph. She had proven that talent, dedication, and heart could overcome doubt, fear, and prejudice. And in that quiet moment, with the piano still resonating beneath her fingers, she understood that this was only the beginning of a journey that would continue to inspire, touch hearts, and remind the world of the extraordinary power of music and determination. After her remarkable performance, the world seemed to notice her in a way it never had before. News of her talent spread quickly, and soon invitations arrived from various events, music schools, and even international programs. She felt both excitement and a little apprehension at the sudden attention. She had always played for herself and for the people close to her, but now, the idea that her music could inspire and move strangers around the world was becoming real. She understood that this recognition came not just from her skill, but from the years of determination, practice, and belief in herself. The world-famous pianist approached her after several of these invitations had come in. His demeanor was no longer intimidating, but genuinely respectful. He spoke with sincerity, praising her resilience, creativity, and emotional depth. She listened, absorbing his words, not as flattery but as acknowledgement of her hard work and talent. His opinion, once a source of doubt and fear, had now become a symbol of the distance she had traveled in her journey. It was a reminder that persistence and passion could change even the minds of the harshest critics. She began to travel to different cities for performances and masterclasses. Each new audience was a new challenge, but also a new opportunity to share her story through music. She could feel the impact she was making. People approached her afterward, expressing how deeply they had been moved. Letters and messages poured in from those inspired by her journey, including others with disabilities who saw in her a reflection of their own dreams. She realized that her music was not only a personal triumph, but also a source of hope for others. Despite the growing recognition, she remained grounded. She never let the applause or praise change who she was. She continued to practice daily, constantly seeking to improve, refine, and explore new expressions through the piano. Her focus was not on fame or reward, but on growth and the joy of connecting with others through music. She found balance by reflecting on her roots, remembering the small practice sessions, the silent afternoons with her teacher, and the moments of struggle that had shaped her into the musician she had become. Her family continued to be her strongest support system. They traveled with her when possible, helping her adjust to new places and audiences. Their quiet encouragement reminded her of the love and belief that had always been the foundation of her confidence. Together, they celebrated milestones, small and large, and shared the joy that came from seeing her dreams unfold. Their presence kept her anchored, a reminder that the journey was as important as the destination. She also began to mentor young musicians who faced their own challenges. She shared not just her techniques, but her philosophy. That music was a language that could speak beyond barriers, and that resilience and dedication were just as important as talent. She encouraged them to trust themselves, to embrace their struggles, and to find strength in their passions. The impact was profound, as she witnessed young musicians discovering confidence and joy through her guidance. Her experiences had equipped her not only to perform but also to inspire and nurture others. As her reputation grew, she was invited to perform at prestigious venues and collaborate with renowned musicians. Each performance was an opportunity to challenge herself, to explore new interpretations, and to deepen her connection with the audience. She approached each opportunity with humility and focus, letting the music guide her rather than the expectations of the crowd. The applause and accolades were gratifying, but she valued the moments when the music itself spoke, when listeners were moved not by fame but by feeling. Through it all, she never forgot the insult that had once seemed so cruel. She often reflected on how it had sparked a deeper determination within her. The memory no longer brought shame or anger. Instead, it reminded her of the strength she had cultivated. It had been a turning point, a moment that challenged her, but ultimately made her more resilient, more focused, and more determined to let her music define her rather than anyone else's opinion. Over time, she began composing her own music. The pieces were deeply personal, reflecting her journey, her emotions, and her perspectives. Each composition was an exploration, a story told through sound. She felt a profound satisfaction in creating music that had never existed before, sharing a piece of herself with the world in a way that was uniquely her own. Her compositions resonated with audiences, touching hearts and inspiring reflection. Through her original work, she solidified her place not only as a performer, but also as a creator and innovator in the world of music. Recognition from critics and peers followed, but she measured success differently. For her, the true reward was the connection she fostered with people through her music. The way a melody could move someone to tears, joy, or contemplation. Each performance, each note, was an opportunity to communicate, to express, and to touch lives. She learned that music was not about impressing others, but about sharing a part of herself and creating moments of understanding and emotion. Years later, she looked back on her journey with gratitude. The struggles, the insults, the doubts, they had all contributed to shaping the musician and the person she had become. She realized that her story was not just about overcoming blindness or proving critics wrong. It was about resilience, passion, and the transformative power of dedication. Her music had become a voice for herself and for others, a reminder that determination and heart could overcome any obstacle. She continued to inspire countless people, performing, teaching, and composing. Her story was shared in articles, interviews, and documentaries, but she remained humble, always attributing her success to practice, support, and an unwavering love for music. She knew that the journey was never truly over. There was always more to learn, more to create, and more people to inspire. The memory of the world-famous pianist's initial insult no longer held any weight. Instead, it became a symbol of her growth, a reminder that challenges could be transformed into opportunities for greatness. She had touched the hearts of thousands, proven her abilities, and shown that limitations are often only barriers until one chooses to rise above them. Her music, her courage, and her perseverance left a lasting legacy, inspiring generations to pursue their dreams and believe in the power of their own potential. In quiet moments, she would sit at her piano, sometimes playing familiar pieces, sometimes exploring new compositions. Each note, each chord, carried with it the history of her journey, the struggles, the triumphs, the lessons, and the unwavering love for music that had defined her life. She had proven that the human spirit, when guided by passion and determination, could overcome even the harshest judgments and reach extraordinary heights. Her story, shared with the world, became a symbol of hope. It showed that talent combined with resilience could silence doubt, touch hearts, and change perceptions. People remembered her not just for her blindness or for the insults she overcame, but for the power of her music, the depth of her soul, and the courage she showed in every performance. She had turned adversity into triumph, proving that determination, talent, and heart. Her story, shared with the world, became a symbol of hope. It showed that talent combined with resilience could silence doubt, touch hearts, and change perceptions. People remembered her not just for her blindness or for the insults she overcame, but for the power of her music, the depth of her soul, and the courage she showed in every performance. She had turned adversity into triumph, proving that determination, talent, and heart could truly make the world stop and listen.